Good afternoon, good evening, people. Welcome to Code It Live. This is a user group meetup. This is not your usual get up and see Sam fail how to code type stream. This is really an expert telling us what it is that we need to know. So I am Sam, your
We
host.
bring it on as the expert.
I don't know. With me, I do have my very good friend, Joe. How are you, sir?
Wonderful, Sam. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I will let Joe introduce himself, but I've known him for years and years. Amazing speaker, amazing human, and you are here to tell us about how to ship apps. And I don't know, should I be using all of these things, Azure and DevOps and artifacts? You tell us. So with that, let me see if I can bring up your screen if you're ready.
Yeah, that's a much better intro slide than I have. Sure. My name is Joe Guadagno. Most people call me Joe G. I am what we call a senior director here at Rocket Mortgage. I lead 5 teams of software engineers. I'm also on the dotnet Foundation Board of Directors. I'm currently the vice chairman in charge of outreach and some of the back-end logistics stuff. If you want to reach out to me, you can contact me in many of these different ways: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, my website, as well as I used to stream regularly. I don't anymore, so I have to kind of take off that list. And then you can catch me on a lot of videos like this on YouTube. That's enough about me. Here we're talking about building and shipping an app. So it's going to be all code, which means PowerPoint goes bye-bye now. If there are any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye every once in a while, flipping over to chat. But in the meantime, hold on a second. I'm going to change something on my screen. I moved my monitor, so now it's very awkward where I put it. Just give me 1 second. Okay, cool. So let's go. We're going to come back to this in a second. I want to show you our most complicated app. So we have, let's make this full screen so that we can see it a little bit better. Hopefully the font size is good for everyone. We have an application here that is probably the most complicated library you'll see ever. It is one class called awesomeness, and then one method called how awesome, which basically picks a number between 0 and 10. So I generally use this as a scale to determine how well my talk is going. So we have a test case for this method that we're using XUnit to call it, and we're making sure that this method, when we returns a value greater than 10. I could also add a certain error to make sure it's less than 10, but this is fine. So let's jump over to the console and make sure.
I was going to say, look at you. You have, unit tests for your simple apps. Well, that's professional.
Yes, there's a reason for that, because later on we're going to show you when we build it how you can test your package to make sure it works before you actually deploy it.
Nice. Our friends are showing up in the chat room here. Full Schnabel, good to see you. Joe, what chat room is referring to is me and Alyssa got on a stream, I think last week, and like for an hour we tried, we couldn't get a button to, compile and show up. Like that's how, professional we are at what we do.
Yeah, I know. There will be no buttons today. Don't worry. I've been on plenty of chats, including Code It Live, where, live demos are always the hardest. Luckily, a lot of this is scripted, so we won't have that awkwardness. So I'm going to go through and run this off. So I'm in the directory. Let me change over to the source, make sure it builds. So do a .NET build. A couple of seconds, it should build. No warning. So I'm going to go back and navigate over to the test folder.
Now, Joe, is this a .NET 7 app, like in your CS project? I missed it.
Yes, it is a .NET 7 app. I didn't cover those details. It's a .NET 7 app. Basically, The test project is .NET 7, but the package is .NET Standard 2.1 because I want to make it available for anyone. Ultimately, this would be a NuGet package. I could, if I wanted to, specify multiple frameworks here to target everything, but for the demo, it's just super easy to give it one target framework. But for other packages, like some of my personal ones, which I can show later on, you'll see that they target multiple platforms.
Can I throw you a curveball question here?
Yeah.
Are you still supporting .NET Standard? And at what point, if so, why? And if not, at what point did you break over?
So the short answer is yes, we still support it. Both at work, I still support it because I have a lot of code that's written in framework that can't migrate for one reason or another. One is time, but the other is that there's just some libraries that are not available in core, which require some rewrites of stuff. For all my side projects, all my personal things like my Desert Code Camp and my broadcasting library and a couple others, I support multiple things, but my Code Camp site is still written in .NET Framework. I haven't updated it yet because one, time, and two, every time I try to update, I end up rewriting pieces of it, and that rewrite, as you know, takes forever. So I'm in the process of rewriting it from the scratch because it's like a 10-year-old application, or actually probably 15 years old, written with web forms and SQL Server and a lot of stored procs and stuff, the way we used to do things, in the early 2000s, 2005. And it's grown since then, but now it's this, bigger, quote unquote, monolith that just needs to be broken down. Just as a side project, I haven't had the time to do it.
I hear you. I think a lot of enterprises are also in the same boat with some of the apps that they need to support. All of the migration help and upgrade assistance. All of this is nice, but like to what you just said, like if you are depending on libraries that have not moved over, it's a hard place to be in because then you're looking at a rewrite of some functionality.
Yeah, and that's the biggest part is if you. A lot of times, like the way things were written worked at the time, but there was better standards or better ways of doing it. And like I always tell my engineers, if you look at the code that you wrote 6 months ago and sometimes 6 days ago, and you don't think there was a better way of doing it, you're probably doing something wrong. So it's important to go back and look, and that's what I've been trying to do. Like with the Desert Code Camp site, for instance, like I said, it uses web forms and a lot of direct database access. So I have, the stereotypical 300-line method in a button click event that triggers a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm in the process of moving that out to a business layer, then in process of moving that out to an API and putting all the test cases around it. So trying to like really clean it up instead of just converting from old to new, which is a challenge.
Yeah, I hear you. Our good friend Aaron's in the chat room. Backward compatibility is hard. It's hard for everyone.
Yeah. I even tried, Microsoft just released a new version of the Project Upgrade Assistant last week.
They did. Mm-hmm.
And I tried running it, and it successfully converted some projects, but the main website, it just can't because it uses web forms and there's no clear cut between web forms and MVC. So it's basically a rewrite for that portion. So like I might as well just rewrite the whole thing, assuming I ever have a Desert Code Camp again. Cool. So now that we are in the test, let's go and make sure it runs. So I'm going to go .NET test. And in a couple of seconds, I should get test pass, which we see right here, one test pass. So now I'm good. So let's go and start with deploying that to Azure artifacts. I'm going to switch over my screen right now to web UI or a website. So for those of you who don't know, Azure I can't get that word out. Azure Artifacts is your own personalized storage area for things that you can use in your application. The most common thing used in there is NuGet packages, but you can also host npm modules, anything that you would get on like a NuGet or Artifactory or a JFrog, things like that. So I'm going to use the Azure Artifacts to host this particular library. And the reason why I do that is so that we can then access it from anywhere. So you see here, I have a sample with some of my utility projects that I use. If I look at the artifacts repo, we'll eventually see that I have a couple of utilities that I publish myself to use. But we're not going to go looking at those. We're going to go and...
Can I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
Before you switch back? So you said this is your personal, but could you do this in a way so that the whole team uses the same thing?
Yes. Right now I'm a team of one, but anyone that has access to this Artifactory, which I'll show you later on how to do that, but anyone that has access to this can see it. I can invite groups of people. You see right here, this button. I can invite people, or I can just mark it as private for mine. Right now, this is my instance of Azure DevOps. So with my license, I'm entitled to 5 people that I can add to it, or more if they have an existing MSDN or Visual Studio subscription, as it's called now. But you can open it up. You can also, I won't show it in this demo, but there's a blog post that I'll bring up later on where you can actually take it and not publish it to here, but publish it directly to NuGet, so that, in theory, the whole world is doing it. This set of utilities is just used for my projects, and the reason why it's in my projects is that there's some quote-unquote proprietary stuff that I have in there that I use for some of my things, but a lot of the open source stuff will publish directly to NuGet and be available in something like GitHub. But this is good for an organization that might not be as big and could afford to have their own version of NuGet. Azure DevOps provides that ability to host these artifacts. So things like I said, NuGet packages, npm modules, JavaScript libraries, etc., that your teams can pull down collectively. Okay, so let's go back here. I want to pull up the public one because that's what we're going to look at. And we are going to click on pipelines. And then we don't have a pipeline right now, so let's go and create a pipeline. I get asked where I want to start with the code. I can choose whether it's in Azure repos. In this particular case, it is Bitbucket, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, or other Git or other subversions. So you basically choose which one. For this one, the example code is in a repo that's on this hosted instance of Azure DevOps. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to choose awesome package because that's the one that we're working with. And then for configure our pipeline, you'll notice there's a lot of basics. So you said that this group is started off in the old Windows Mobile, moved on to Android and others. You can host multiple types of pipelines. So I can build an ASP.NET project, a core framework project, desktop, Windows. These are just the ones that are easily shown out of the box. Obviously, they're all the Microsoft ones, but if you click Show More, you can see I can build Azure Functions. I can build Android apps and deploy them. I can build AMP projects, Kubernetes, you name it, you can probably build it straight from here. So I am going to choose a starter pipeline because I want to show you how to build it from the scratch. A lot of these will have pre-configured things to do. So now that we have it open, we can see that there are a couple of items here. So the first is the comments. Think of this as the hello world portion. If you want to read more on YAML, you can click on this link, aka.ms YAML. It'll explain it, but this basically uses that YAML, which is used in things like Docker, Circle CI, and a lot of deployment tools. It's basically, if you like JSON, this is its nasty cousin that no one ever wants to talk about. Because it's very.
That is one of the best ways I've heard anybody describe it.
Yeah, because it's so challenging. Once you understand how it works, it's good. But you see here, I don't know how well you can see it on my screen, but those are two spaces. Spacing and tabs and indentation are super important in this with this technology. So it's very important to use a smart editor. I'm going to be doing a lot of the editing at first in the browser. Then we're going to switch over to Visual Studio Code to show you can mix and match them. But before I do that, let's explain what this is. So first, there's a trigger. So this is what is going to trigger this pipeline to execute. So right now you see it says -main. So that means anytime that there's a commit to the main branch of this repo, this is going to trigger. So what does it trigger? It first starts off with a pull. So a pull is what kind of resource do you want to execute this pipeline in? The default is a VM image, which uses Ubuntu latest, so the latest version of Ubuntu, which is like 20 dot something. And there are multiple choices for this. I can pick if I know I want a Linux box, or if I have some Windows specific stuff, I can choose Windows, etc. But I am going to go with the default. The reason why I'm choosing this one is because .NET, and especially .NET Core, is able to run on multiple environments, and this is the smallest, fastest VM that you can get, so it'll spin up very quickly. If you use the Windows VM, it can take like 3 to 4 minutes to download everything and scale it back up. After that, the workflow goes through something called steps. So steps are the different actions you want to take. So this default one here is going to script out echo hello world. So basically in the console, it's going to say hello world. And then it's going to script out to the console these other things. So it's going to echo out. So if you're used to batch files or doing things in a bash prompt or command line, this will eventually spit out that text. So we're going to click save and run. When you click
one more question before you
Yeah.
go on. Aaron was saying like you sometimes never use YAML enough to really like it, because like you want to be careful about it being flaky and not breaking things. You just set it up and then you let it be. Is there any other option than YAML, or you just have to?
You have to do it in YAML.
Yeah.
There are some visual ways to make it better to use. Like right now, this is the out of the box. In a minute after I do the commit, I'll show you some of the editing features within this editor that you can do, so you basically don't have to touch the YAML. It will generate it all for you. It's basically like a wizard. Do this, click next, do this, click next. And then there's some plugins for Visual Studio that make it easy for you. The good thing is the way you design, or if you design your YAML a certain way, or the deployment script a certain way, you never have to touch it again. It's copy, paste, reuse. So if you notice, when we go to Visual Studio Code, I'll show you with this sample, there's actually a backup YAML. And my blog post that I'll show at the end has this exact YAML file that I basically use everywhere. The only thing you have to change is just the name or wherever you're deploying it to. So you don't have to come back and touch this anymore.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you pointed out the Ubuntu one is the smallest VM to kind of boot up. Does Azure give you a choice of what's available, like for it to
Yes.
even bring up? Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. If I click here and choose Show Assistant, actually the Show Assistant only works with tasks. You can look up via the help here on the list of images. They have a list. I want to say it's like 70 or 80 some odd images, depending on what you're building. Like for Android, there's a bunch of different JVMs and different images depending on what SDK you want, etc. As well as different services that are available too. And we'll cover some of that in the next steps after we run this. So the first thing we do is click on Save and Run, and then you get a commit message. This is going to be the actual Git commit message that you would see. So if you did a Git add-m and whatever message, that would appear here. You could commit directly to the main branch or create a new branch. I like to create a separate branch for my continuous integration so it doesn't mess up with main. And for the demo, I'm going to uncheck the start a pull request because I don't want to have to bother with the going back and forth. So I'm going to click Save Changes. It creates the pipeline and then brings me up to the status message. So a couple of things to show you here on this page. You'll see here I have a build number. Now the build number by default is formatted year, month, day, dot, a number. The number starts with 1 and goes upwards. This is basically the number of times this build was executed today. So this is our first one, and you'll see this number will constantly increment throughout the day. And this is the Git commit message, set up CI with Azure pipelines. Here it was triggered by me, which is good because I'm usually triggering my wife, so it's a good thing. The repository and version, this is the Git repository, and this is the CI branch that we created. And then 72600F52 is the Git hash ID for it. You see when it was started, how long it took, and if we tagged any work items in ADS or any artifacts, they will appear here. Once we start adding our test results, you'll see coverage here of how many tests passed and how much coverage was made. If you're watching when this first started, this was blue, meaning it was running. Now it's a green check mark, and it took 6 seconds. So let's go take a look at the job itself. So if we take a look at it, you'll see that every job always has this initial job, this finalized job, and report build status. So this basically gets it set up. That's going to get the machine that you're running. So in this case, Ubuntu 22, long-term support, what image it's using, etc. So you can find out what you're getting part of it. Next step, this one varies because I'm using Git. It's checkout awesome project. Now, I didn't have to do anything with it when we set it up. Because we said it was part of Git, it automatically added the ties together. So if you look at here, anything with the blue line are major commands. Everything that's white is basically a verbose output. So we're getting the Git version, adding long file support, initializing the directory, then it's getting a Git remote. Because remember, when you're getting this image, you're basically getting a blank slate operating system. So with Git installed, so now we have to add the repo, configure the repo, get all the files in order to build. So here you see it found 14 objects to download, and then it downloaded them. Then we have our run our one-line script. We see right here, we got our hello world, run the multi-line script, add other tasks, and then the cleanup. So if we look at our job here, let's go back one more level to our repo. We basically ran this step and this step. So let's do something a little bit better. Before we go do that, I want to make a simple thing here. I want to make sure I pull out the CI branch here and that we're using that. And once I do that, you should notice in here, I now have this Azure pipelines.yaml. That was what we created, which has that trigger main using the Ubuntu latest, echo hello world, and the other echoes. Ignore this one. This is my backup file in case something goes terribly wrong in this demo. But you'll be able to see the full code for that in a little bit. So now we're good. Also should show you something, which I hate doing this live because I never know what's going to go in here. So I also get an email about it. And here's a awesome package succeeded message. So you'll get constant emails every time it runs and when builds are broken, and you can turn that off, but it's great to have it on while you're initially doing your building. So now we got.
Sorry, a quick question. In the project itself, like you had test cases, but that's not obviously picked up by itself, right?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
They will be in about 3 steps.
Okay.
So let's start with the first step. So we're going to go and get rid of these. And I clicked on the show assistant, which wasn't displayed before, but this is kind of like how we build it out. So the first thing we need to do, you can see there are hundreds and hundreds of assistants, and you can download many. There's a marketplace for them. Like there is a marketplace for Writer or Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code for anything you want to do, copying files, uploading, doing commits, merging files, downloading NuGet packages. But we're going to start with the very basic one. So the first thing I do is choose .NET Core, and then you'll see I have these commands. Now, anything that's starred in red is a required parameter. Everything else is optional. If you hover over them, you get command specific, or I should say argument specific stuff. So for this command, it says the .NET command to run select custom to add your own commands. So the first thing we want to do is choose SDK, which is not here. That's because this is the .NET Core. So the first thing I really want to do is use .NET. What this is going to do is tell the pipelines, when you start, I want you to get me version X of .NET. So I'm going to choose the SDK and then tell it I want version 7.x. I can get as specific as 7.0.100 or 7.0.x. It'll take the X and replace it with the latest version, subversion, or minor version, whatever that field is. So if I did 7.x, it would grab the latest, highest version of the 7 runtime. If I do, I don't actually know if this will work, but this helps explain it. If I do X, it'll just grab me the latest, but I never recommend anyone do that. Typically you do major, minor, and then in most cases, you don't care about the revision. If I click advanced, it'll show me anything that's related to this. So here, there's a compatible Visual Studio version. I can indicate I only want this for Visual Studio 16.6.4. This would be helpful if you're building a extension for Visual Studio and you want to make sure that that version of the framework is the right version for that. So once I do that, I click add, and you can see it added a bunch of steps here. Now, if I click save, see I get the automatic message of update Azure pipelines. I'm going to just do a different one so we can see. Downloading .NET 7. I'm going to commit directly, and let's open up a new window so I can see it. And let's refresh this page. Did I hit save on the other screen? I thought I did.
Do you need to hit run?
Well, usually when you hit save, it does it. There it goes. Now it's doing it.
And also the .NET dependencies, like why are you having to explicitly tell it? Like, can it not figure it out from your project dependencies?
It can from the project dependencies. The reason why you can tell it is so that it can cache it on the build servers.
Oh, I see.
So it will grab a version that you want to use. It's smart enough to know that you need 7, but it does it better for caching. So I look at this job, we now have a use.net here, which is the name of the task. And if I look at it, you'll see it is running .NET 0.x. It found version 7.0.200. You could ignore this one. It says it didn't find a specific one for this Unix, but then it goes and downloads it and makes it available. But I really don't like this use.net. I mean, this one's clear what it's doing, but I want to go and change that. There is the ability to put in a display name. You'll notice also when as soon as you start entering spots, you get IntelliSense in the browser. So I'm going to do display name and set it up to call it, I'm going to call it download.net 7.x. That's cool. I'm going to go and create a new task. I just want to show you, you can either type them or do it regularly. And here it gives me IntelliSense to look at all the tasks that are here. So I'm going to choose .NET CLI 2. Now this has 2 parts to this. The first part, so everything in the .NET Core CLI is the task name. You can look these up. They're NuGet basically NuGet packages, and a lot of them are open source code. The @ tells it what version. So here I'm looking at the 2nd version of this, which is the latest version. That's the equivalent of me basically clicking this right here. So in order to save me from messing up, I am going to do it this way. And I am going to choose a build command and add it. And then I'm going to come here and add a display name for build project. Now, the reason why I add display names is because you can have a very complicated set of pipelines that do a bunch of things. And it would basically say, because we're going to do a build, then we're going to do a test, and then we're going to do a restore, you'll basically see .NET Core CLI at number 2, 3, or 4, or 5 times. So kind of want to make sure that it's clear what we did. The other thing you'll notice is here, now there's a settings. If I click on that, it automatically takes me back to the editor, so I don't have to hand edit this if I want. I'm not going to save it yet because we're going to add one more to it. Okay. First thing we're going to do now is add a new test for testing it. So let's go here and choose .NET test. And then for this one, really don't need to add anything because it's going to find any test projects in here automatically. So let's go here. I always hate hitting tab in the browser because it automatically takes the first item. So now that I have this, I'm going to save it. I probably should have given it a name, but now if we go and refresh this, or not refresh this one, let's go look for the new job. This is the latest. I'm going to click on it so we can see the progress. Here it downloaded it. Now it figured out that we have all these tests. Now these are the custom names I gave it. So now it's downloading .NET 7.1. It took 7 seconds. Now it's building the project. It's on 2, 3, 4 seconds and going. And you see it's constantly restoring. And now it's going to test. And if the test is successful, I should see something pop up. You notice the test failed here. So let's go and see what happened. So I go and look at it. I see a total of 1 test file matched the pattern. It found the test is valid and it failed. But why did it fail? Because this project was set up for .NET 5, I believe. I don't think I updated it. So let's go back and see if we can fix that project.
So Joe, a couple of questions.
Yes.
First is Aaron was talking about like the autocomplete when you're typing in the display names. That looks pretty decent.
Yeah, it has a lot of it. It's basically like Visual Studio. I really believe, and I can't state this for a fact, but I believe they use the same Monaco editor that is used inside Visual Studio Code. So the same engine that provides this and provided for CodeSpace is used here.
I wouldn't be surprised, yeah. And you were showing us like the email it triggers every time. So, okay, worst case scenario, let's just say, you're doing something super complicated. Like, how much are you waiting for? Like, you're downloading all of your dependencies, but after you do a couple of times, things are cached, right?
Yes. And there are steps where you can build your packages and cache them too, where it'll detect, and my blog post shows about it. I don't go into great detail about it here, but you can actually add a step to cache all the resources that you've built or downloaded, and it will just pull those in so you're not constantly downloading and recreating everything all at once. So let's see this test package. I thought I had it as .NET. Oh, it is .NET 7. So where did it fail? Let's see if I picked the wrong version in the script. So let's go here. Close you for a second. We're downloading .NET 7. We're asking it to build, then asking it to test. So that's right. Let's go and see the code. .NET fail. Awesome line 12. Maybe that was just a freak run. Maybe for some reason it generated something less than 0. I'm going to try rerunning it and see. So there's this option for rerunning failed jobs here. So since this one failed, I can rerun it again. And let's see what happens. So it's going to trigger a new run of it. You see it mocks me with attempt 2. when I first built out this presentation, some of these were going to like attempt 15, attempt 16. I kept getting emails from Azure. I'm like, okay, stop. You're mocking me. I get it. My build stinks. I'm a terrible engineer. Don't remind me of it. There was 1.2. If you run the same build a couple of times and it fails, it'll say Azure will shoot you a message. See, that time it passed. So it must have been something fluke in my test that failed. If it fails multiple times, a message will pop up right around here saying, hey, this build failed 3 times in the last hour. Do you want to take a look at it? I'm like, okay, thank you. I know better for next time. So when you're building these, don't be humiliated or or think less of yourself when Azure starts to mock you that your builds are failing. Okay, so now that we have it built, let's pack up the assembly. And I don't mean pack it up, but in NuGet, to create the assembly into NuGet package, it's called packing it. Basically, it creates a zip file with a couple of other things in there. So to do that, we're going to click NuGet pack. And then here we get a bunch of extra parameters. Now, I don't do ****star.cs because that's going to package all of them. I only want to package up the one that's sitting in source. So because this is a Unix machine, I have to follow the Unix syntax. So this says start from the root directory, go to the source folder, and then pack csproj file, or any csproj file. Luckily, there's only one in here. And I'm going to choose do not build because I've already built it in the previous step. We built it, we packaged it. Now that build is going to be saved off on that virtual machine so that this step can pick it up. And then there is some additional options for package versioning. I'm going to leave that off. And the verbosity, this depends on your liking. In the beginning, I recommend, especially if you're packing NuGet packages, to set it to verbose because that will tell you every single thing that's happening. I'm going to leave it on for now, but normally I would set it to normal. I'm going to click add. Now, one of the things I have to mention, and I think Aaron mentioned this before, that YAML editing is challenging. The SD or the assistant is not super smart. If I was to, let's say, have my cursor point here and then added a pack command in here, it's going to throw it right where the cursor was. So it's important to remember when you're doing that to have your cursor where where the text should be edited. So I always by default hit enter when I'm done with the task. Okay, now I'm going to save. And I'm going to do packaged NuGet file, click commit, and then I want to trigger a run. It used to be save and run. I wonder when they took off the run part.
Yeah.
Yes,
maybe
sir.
I was going to ask, like, maybe I missed it. Like, did you get to specify, like, by default where it puts the build package? Is it in the same VM, or can you choose where you want to put it?
You can choose where you want to put it. The defaults for all these tasks work in a folder, which I'll show you right here. If you look at the job, when you build, you can see where it's generating all of them. So it generates it local on the machine. So it's in this home VSTS work one source directory, and then it output the assembly to here. So when I go in, package it, I forgot to change the display name, you'll see that it's looking at that because I told it to find the CS proj in this source directory. So it found that one, and then it is going to build it and eventually ignore all this other stuff. That's because I have it on detailed. Eventually, at the very, very bottom, and I'm going to turn off detailed for this because I just wanted to show how big it is. Eventually, you'll see that right around here, you see, where is it? That it generates a NuGet package. We'll see that on the next one because it's a little unclear.
Yeah, I think I saw the generate new spec.
Yeah, it generates the new spec, but then there's actually a generate project. Display name, package project, and then I'm going to turn the verbosity to normal. And then we'll be able to see it a little bit easier.
Now, while it's building, this is for a library that you're shipping, and you're creating a NuGet package. Would this be like the similar process if you were actually shipping an app?
Yep, same exact process. The only step right there, and I can bring up one. Not that repo. Here's a sample that does builds a .NET Core app, caches it, and publishes it off to Azure Web Apps. And then another one here to publish the functions. You can publish anywhere. I'm just showing you explicitly how to do it for a NuGet package.
Yeah, things are a little bit more complicated with native platform things that I'm into.
Yeah, and actually, if you go and create a pipeline for, let's say, if you're building a Maui app, or even if you're building native for iOS or Android, you can choose one of the pre-built packages and it will do most of the work for you. So you don't even have to know the steps. I'm doing it more of a step-by-step to demonstrate like all the features that are there. And here you can see that we have the awesome package 1.0.0.new package.
You call it a new package.
What was that?
You call it a formal new package. We call it a nupkeg.
Yep, nupkeg. Nice. That totally makes sense. Okay, now we are going to update this project. We're going to update the project file to allow for versioning, because right now this is going to just take the version from .NET, which is always 1.0.0, unless you change it. Now there are a couple of options you can do. You can do it with tasks. There's something called git semverge, which will generate a version number for you for either your assemblies, NuGet packages, or what have you, based on a combination of the project properties and or NuGet information. So I'm going to show you a way to do it a little bit more manually. And I actually prefer this way because you can control the numbering a little bit better. So let me go and download the latest version of it, see everything we have added. So I'm going to go and update my CS proj file to add some additional stuff to it. So there's two ways to update the data in your NuGet package or nutpeg, as Sam put it. One is to create something called a new spec file, which is typically your project name .nusbc. But since version 5 of .NET and NuGet version 4, I believe it's smart enough to read from the source code from the CS proj file directly, and it shares properties. So I'm going to copy and paste an example one here. So copy and paste this one here. So you see I basically added a company name, I added an author. Now this author should tie off to the author on NuGet if you're going to publish to NuGet. We're not going to do that in this particular thing. Give it a product name and then a description. All this is going to show up in NuGet for you, as well as the copyright info. The next thing we're going to do is versioning. Again, this is going to be a copy paste, but I'll explain what everything is in here. So we're creating additional property groups inside of our package, and that's right here, lines 11 through 15. We're going to specify the major, minor, and build numbers for it. So this component package should be major version 1, minor version 0, and then version build number of 1. But if you notice, sometimes in builds, there's things added like preview or something else like that. If you go to Visual Studio or JetBrains Writer, there's a little checkbox that says include preview versions of things. I'm going to show you how to do that now because you'll want to do that as you're doing testing of pulling down your packages from NuGet before you potentially release them to the world. So you're going to do that with a couple of different things. The first is this property group here, which helps to build out the naming. So you see we have here for version prefix. So that's basically after the major, minor, and build are done. It may or may not add additional text to it. So there's a condition here. And based on the condition, that's everything inside of this quote. That's condition. I want you to do this. So I'm saying for a condition, if the build number, build underscore build number equals nothing, then assume I'm building using the major, version minor, version build, and the word local. So this is if I'm at my machine right here doing a .NET build, and I'll show you that in a minute. Then I'm saying if not that, if it's the build number doesn't equal nothing, meaning that there's something in there, and the configuration, this is the .NET configuration. When you run .NET build, you can specify the configuration environment. Or like if I build from here in code, always forget the command for it, but I can do the .NET build here, or actually it's in the play command here. If I choose build, debug, it'll build a debug, or I can choose to release. If it's that, what I want you to do is to take the version string and make it version major dot version minor dot version build dash the build number and preview. So that will create 1.0.1 dash 2023-02-20 dot whatever build number is dash preview. And if the configuration isn't debug, I just want you to do version major, version minor, and version build. So let's take a look at those. I'll get to where the build number is defined in a minute. Actually, before I do that, I'll just go show you now. There's a bunch of pre-built variables that you can choose from. And if you, come on, machine, catch up.
Yeah, this is a little hardcore and nice. Yeah, Aaron is saying like the way you're explaining build versions and also how you do the previews. This is nice.
Yeah. So on the learn.microsoft.com site, under pipelines, there's predefined variables that list every variable known here, and those are in the $ parentheses with some variables. So system.access, you can see here. There's system.debug that indicates you're bugging. This one is super, 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 super helpful when you're first creating your pipeline. Turn on system debug and set it to true. That's going to generate a lot of messages to tell you where you messed up. And trust me, you're going to mess up when you're first doing it. Unless you just literally copy and paste what I give you, then you're good to go. You see there's lots of things like agent directories, working folders. Sam, you asked what directory does it pull from? Here's a variable that you can actually see where the staging directory is. I can get the build ID, I can get the build number, and this is the variable that we're using to determine what build number to use. I can get a directory from the binaries, container, the definition name, you name it, there's probably a property for it. As you can see, I'm not even halfway done scrolling on this page. So let's go and see the actual code. So if I come here and open up a terminal window, since I closed the previous one, let's go to my source directory, cd, hello. Uh-oh. My computer said enough with you. It just stopped. What happened, BS? Huh, my keyboard just turned off. See if it works now. Huh. The Bluetooth on my Mac just magically turned off and killed the keyboard. Bear with me 1 second.
Oh, this is classic.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just, keyboard died. Hold on a second while I change keyboards. Okay, so here, let's make sure this is working. .NET build -c debug. So I'm saying build it and use the configuration of debug. So this is basically going to create something that hits this condition on line 18. To do that, once it builds, if I was in Windows, I can open up the Windows Explorer, right-click and choose File Version Properties. But since I'm on a Mac, I have to use a tool that will show me that. So I'm going to go to the source directory, cd source, and then bin, and then debug to get me into that folder. And because we're using .NET Standard, I need to navigate to that directory. And then I have a .NET tool in here called version info that I can run, and it will tell me the version info. So here, the file version is 1.0.1.0, and then the product is 1.0.1-local. So it met this condition. So that's cool. And I'm going to just change this to 2 just to show you that the incrementing works.
Also, this is hardcore. You have a .NET version info tool.
Yeah, I actually downloaded it because I couldn't find a way to find the .NET version information on a Mac, and the .NET team released this package because there's no real easy way to read it on the Mac. So I'm going to go and commit this one change, edit version info, and then commit and push. Now, if I go back to our pipeline. I'm just going to hit refresh on this page because it should show latest version in here, which I didn't make any modifications to that, so we're good. See if another pipeline ran, which it didn't, so I'm going to just click run it and run the Circle CI one. For some reason, my trigger is not working. Oh, I know why. Remember I said the trigger works on the package? I have the trigger set for main, but I updated, I said update on main, but I've only been updating the CI branch. So that's why it hasn't been running on save. So let's go and look at this. The only difference we're going to notice now is on the test project. It is going to, or not test project, the package project. It is going to build and create a different version name for it. So if we scroll down, well, that was test. We scroll down here, now we notice our package number says awesome package 1.0.2 dash the build number, which is, as we can see here, 2023-02-20.6 dash preview, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So let's go and push that now, or actually before we push that, when we're doing our builds, we need to be able to distinguish between a debug and a release. Right now, by default, it only does debug releases. So we're going to go and add in a set of configuration parameters. So right above the trigger, stop it. Right above the trigger, we are going to add in what's called parameters. And I'm copying and pasting this just to make it easier. So here I'm saying create a parameter called build config. And this is the display name. By default, if I don't specify anything, use the value of debug. And here is your list of values to choose from, debug and release. So now when I click save and build, it's going to give me the option to choose which one of those parameters I want. But that doesn't do it all the way. That just gives you the parameters. I have to be able to use them. So the next thing I need to do is set up a variable to consume these parameters. So after the trigger and before the pull, I am going to put in the variables. So I'm going to create a variable called build configuration that is going to take the parameters of build config. So basically read what input I had for here and assign it to this variable. That's what this $ open parentheses means. You're getting some variable in this build package. So now I basically set up a variable for the C#. I basically did a var build config equals parameters dot build config. Now that we have it, we have to update the build project to consume that. So if you remember in the terminal, I did something like -C to do it, but I'm not specifying that right now. So let's go and do that. So in order to do that, I need to add to the build project, I need to add in 2 more parameters. So one is versioning scheme. I'm going to say do it by build number, and then I'm going to pass in an argument --config, or you can do, if you like shorthand, it's -C. Since I'm typing it here, I just find it easier to do configuration to clearly spell it out, but your preference is yours. And then I say, okay, pass in that value that I called build configuration into it to set it up. And this by build number says take the build number from the previous, like I showed you on in the last demo. Now if we build this, we should be good. So I'm going to click save. I'm going to do edit build config, commit directly to main. And now I'm going to have to run it one more time because now it actually realizes that trigger. But now you notice I have this build configuration to use here, and I can select debug or release, and debug is selected by default. So I'm going to click run.
This is very nice, like the way it just picks up your build parameter
Yep.
in the UI itself.
So now it's going to, and you can add in lots of other parameters. Now it's going to build the project and keep it in there. So while that's building, I'm going to move on to the next step, and that's creating the repository for the artifacts. So you notice here there's this tab called artifacts. So I'm going to click it and open it up in a new window. You see, got a whole bunch of them. This is my supporting libraries artifacts. So this is my public one that I use. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to create a new one just to make it a little bit clearer. I'm going to do the shared packages one. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a feed, and we're going to call this feed, let's call it Sam's feed. So I feel like typing global app dev, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to make it available to the public for now so anyone can download this. And it'll last for a whole minute because I'm going to go and delete this after the feed, after the talk is done, so I don't forget. Now that we have the feed, it's created. We're not going to connect to it yet, but I want us to show how we can add the pipeline to automatically push to this. So let's go back to the pipeline. We see our build was finished by now, which I should hope so. It takes seconds. If we look at the package, we see it created 8-preview because this was the 8th time it ran. So let's go back to our pipeline, and now we're going to add one more item. And this one is going to be called NuGet push. The path, we're going to leave it because it's going to that artifact directory. So remember when I showed you the build parameters, this is one of them, the artifact directory. So this is where it created that publish. I can choose the feed that I want to publish to. If you're going to a NuGet server like the real NuGet.org, you can choose that, or this organization. So I'm going to choose this organization and then pick Sam's feed because it added that feed to it as an example. I'm going to go click add, and then like I do with everything else, add a display name, publish to artifacts, hit save, publish, run. I'm going to run debug. Now, once this is done, we're going to probably get an error in a minute or so. Actually, when it gets to the publish part, is it's going to realize that I did not give my account the rights to publish to that artifact, which is funny because I'm the one actually running it, but behind the scenes, it's running as a different user. So we have to tell that user, we have to give that permission to that user to run. Basically, I have to add that permission to my account. And if it works, that's because I already added it and forgot to do it. Nope, it failed, which I expected it to because I didn't give it the permissions to publish. So the way we do that is to go back to the artifact, and then under settings, we have to go to permissions, and then under, I have to delete this public build servers because this is the wrong permission. I don't know why it creates that one, and add a contributor to public build service. J Guadagno is that's just the name of my account. So I'm basically setting that the public build service can publish to the package, and that's the contributor permission. Now I click save, and that added it. So now when I build it, I should be able to go. So just to show that, I'm going to rerun the failed jobs. So now I have this set, let it run in the background. I'm going to show you how to connect to that in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So
and there is, sorry, quick question, Joe. There is no way of, stopping where it has failed and resuming from then on, right? It's
no,
just
because
a
once
job.
it fails, that build server
Right,
is
the
basically
machine
gone.
is brought down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not gone right away. It's retained for a little bit, but they don't allow you to resume because your state is
Too many things can
dirty.
be, dirty, exactly.
So we are going to connect to that pipeline. So here I have this project that is going to use this test class. And as you can see, it's red squiggly line because awesome package is not defined. So I want to tell VS Code to use my own custom NuGet, basically go to Artifactory, just like you would if you downloaded or are licensed for the Telerik products. They create their own custom NuGet source they do it at your machine level. I'm doing it for this project level. So I need to create a NuGet.config file and then give it the source. So I don't know what the source is. Luckily, the artifact gives it to you. So if I go back here, you see I can do connect to feed. And then there's a lot of different ways to set up. So if I want to use .NET, here's the command lines. If I want to update NuGet exe, if I want to update Visual Studio, if I want to update NPM, let's say I'm storing NPM packages or Maven or pip, it gives you lots of different ways to do it. I'm going to click on .NET because it's going to give me this part right here, which basically gives me everything I need to connect to that package. So I go back to Visual Studio Code, paste that in here, and now I can use it. So if I go back to my command line for a test application, I can do a .NET restore, and it should go out and pull that version. Now you notice it didn't have any versions to add. You're probably like, this guy Joe has no idea what the hell he's talking about. Actually, I do for this particular case. The reason why it failed is because there is nothing to add. So if I go to the pipelines, I told you that we are rerunning it, and it actually ran and published, and you'll see here that your package was pushed. Well, how come NuGet didn't see it? Well, NuGet didn't see it for one reason, basically because it's marked as a preview package right now. You see right here now in Sam's feed, there's an awesome package and version 1.0.2, blah, 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 .10 preview. So this is what NuGet uses to determine if a build is preview. I don't have a quote unquote real version or non-preview version. So if I wanted to run this, I would have to do, or not this one, I would have to do, sorry.
Like this is so easy with the GUI tool where you can just check that box, like give me the preview box.
I think it's dash preview, I think.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I didn't know it either. I was just guessing literally. I don't know what the preview is, but in a box, you would have to do that. So let's go. And the final step is let's make this a real NuGet package without a preview. So I'm going to go back to this run. And I'm going to run a new job. And this time I'm going to choose release. And click run. And now it should give me an 11, which it did. And I'm going to go to jobs. and take a look, which is cue for me to get a drink. Now, once this is building, the build and test and everything run. And if the test happens to fail again, it'll, fail the build. So if I go and modify any code, I have my test cases to make sure things are working. So for all my open source projects, they all have test cases, and I make sure the unit tests work. And in the event I actually publish the code and they break, it's one extra step for me to double check. So let's look at the package. You see here, it generated an awesome package 1.0.2 and successfully published it. So if I go look at the feed and click refresh, you see now I have version 1.0.2. And actually there's where is it? I think if I click on the actual feed itself, I can see all the different versions that are available. Now I can unlist something, which takes it out. As a unwritten rule, you never take something out once you publish it. It should be generally available to everyone, because you never know if someone included that into a build. Now you see how many people are actively using it, how many people downloaded it. Right now, there are none. So let's go back to my NuGet package or my app that's using it, run a restore again. Now all the packages are there. I should be able to come here and do a .NET build. Oops, there. Should be able to come here and do a .NET build. And why didn't you see it? Oh, duh. It's doing a .NET build, but I forgot to add the package. I added the source, but I didn't do the .NET. I skipped this step. I should have did add package, and here I could have added the pre-release or the regular package. Now it's added. If you scroll up here, you can see I'm actually going to guadagno.packages.visualstudio.com and then the full GUID for that package. So now my package is added. It's no longer red. Now let's see how the app rated this talk in a number between 0 and 10. How well did I do? The talk is rated a 7. Damn it. I want one day that I do this talk and I get a 0 on it just to choose. Usually it's a 7 or 8, but it adds for the fun factor of it.
You're also a very pro VS Code user. Like, you never leave, even to get the file info. You never leave.
Yeah, I've tried doing this demo in a lot of different ways. I can do it in Visual Studio, or I can do it in JetBrains Writer. It's just a little bit easier because everything is like right intact, and it doesn't require me constantly switching out. Yeah. But normally I use the tools like Writer or VS to build and stuff, but this is very typing intensive.
Yeah. No, this is incredible. Like, in just over an hour, you had started with absolutely nothing, and you built a full pipeline, deployed the tool, pre-release or release, and then got it consuming in another app. So very impressive.
Yep. And if you want, there's a blog post here as to signing it. So if you want to digitally sign, if you have a code certificate like from DigiCert or something, I have steps on.
Joe, before you go through that, can you grab that URL and just drop it to me in private chat in the other window? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be on my next set of slides too.
Oh, okay. You had it. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'll paste the other ones in there too. But you can actually copy out. So let's go back to PowerPoint. Let's minimize you for a second. Minimize you for a second. Minimize you. Hey, where'd PowerPoint go? PowerPoint is gone. Up the row. Let's bring it back.
Anyway, so that's the URL, folks. If you want to get to that blog post.
If you go here, this blog post will show you, and I just copied it for Sam to paste in there. That one will show you everything that, oh, come on. That will show you, where'd my Visual Studio go?
Your machine wants you to have dinner. Call it a day.
Yeah. That post here will basically show you everything I did, including signing. And if you're not a glutton for punishment like me, at the very bottom of it, you can
blog post.
Yeah. Well, it goes through the whole entire thing plus signing the package, which is extra work. There is a YAML that you can get right here, which is the fully qualified YAML. So it's everything I just did. You can copy and paste this and use it as your own to copy everything you did.
Yeah, very nice.
And that's it. If there are any other questions, I'll open it up. If not,
no, nothing else. Nothing else that you haven't answered already. No, this was very, very good. Aaron was saying like how precious this was just to have somebody explain build SEM versions by itself, and then how you mark things preview versus release, and how you construct a full-on pipeline from scratch. So I might actually use some of this. I'm getting ready to push another app to the app stores. Haven't done that in a couple of years, so that's a whole other level of pain. So
actually, there's an easy way to do it with pipelines. So I brought it up before. If I click here and I'm going to do a new pipeline, let's say I'm going to do the Android one because the iOS one's a little bit more challenging because you need a certain build services because of Xcode and stuff. But there is an Android one that has the started stuff to get, and then there's tasks to publish it. So there's the Android signing, which you can add, and then there's Play Store, I think it's called, or maybe Android Store.
Yeah, you saw it for a second. I know what you were typing.
There is a way straight from here where you can publish it directly. You build it, but they have a lot of the steps built in here. You can also do it in GitHub Actions too.
Right. Yeah, tooling is here to help. For sure. All right, this was very, very good. Chat room, if there are no more questions, you know where to find Joe. You had the your contact info up. So this was very, very good. So yeah, find Joe any of these places, and you're always very available to share your knowledge. Love that. Love everything that you do. So thanks for spending an hour and a half with us, just trying to educate us on how these pipelines work.
Hey, no worries.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to bring down your desktop for a second, and it's. Have you had dinner yet, or no?
No, it's 7:30.
Yeah, me too.
Gonna run somewhere local before I go back to the hotel room.
There you go. Well, you're actually in your office. I thought you were back in your hotel room already.
No, I'm in the office. Don't trust the bandwidth at the hotel.
That's true.
I'm broadcasting from my leader's office because I can close the door and everything.
There you go. Well, I won't keep you for any further then. Hopefully you get something good to eat and drink and, relax.
Are we still streaming, or did you stop the streaming?
No, we are still on. Yeah.
When are you guys going to announce the DevReach stuff. I know we just opened up the.
So yeah, what Joe is referring to is yeah. Let's see. Can I still share screen? I can show you real quick what Joe is talking about. So we do a conference in Sofia, Bulgaria, because that's where our engineering HQ is, and it's generally a good time. And we haven't been able to in the last couple of years, but we are bringing it back this year. So I don't know what's the easiest way. I can just go to my feed. And so if you folks are interested, go ahead and submit. And it's this one here, Sessionize. Look for DevReach, because this thing is open now, happening October 25th and 26th.
3 more weeks.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, go for this, people, if you are interested in coming out to Sofia, Bulgaria, which is a beautiful town.
And a great event too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We'll try. So, yeah. All right. So I think, let's see if I can move my windows back into my main where I'm looking at. So thank you, people. Thank you, chat room, for being with us. And this will all be recorded and put up on YouTube's with high def and all the good things. So Joe, thank you for taking the time out of your evening and your busy day, out of after your long day, to come and do this with me. Much appreciated.
Just like you, we both love doing this. So,
yeah. All right, so I think that's it from us for this user group meeting. We'll see you next month, right around here, third Mondays. I think we might have Matt from Couchbase talk us a little bit about what's latest and greatest in the Couchbase land. So that'll be fun. So until then, you take care. We'll see you on the next stream. Okay, bye.
Bye.